Coming up next on The Voice of Alabama Politics, promises made and promises broken. Also, the V-Team takes a look at legal corruption. And Speaker Mike Hubbard and his mouthpiece, J. Mark White, have been awfully silent. What's this? Silence to the hams? All this and much, much more coming up next on The V.
The Voice of Alabama Politics, with your host, Bill Brett, and the V-Team with Claire Austin, Susan Britt, Jack Campbell, Baron Coleman, Charlana Spencer, and special reports with Jonathan Barbie. Now, the #1 political show in Alabama, The V.
Welcome to The Voice of Alabama Politics, where we tackle the tough issues so you have the hard facts. I'm your host, Bill Britt, and as always, I'm joined by the V-Team. Welcome all.
Good morning.
Jack, nice to have you on the first segment.
Thank you, Bill. Always a pleasure.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you here. In 2010, when the Republicans ran for office, they said they made certain promises. After the first year, Mike Hubbard said those promises had been kept. After 5 years, we have corruption, we have a broken government, and our economy is in the toilet. Recent figures released by the U.S. Congress show that Alabama in those 5 years only grew by 6%, where national average has been 11%. Baron, what's gone wrong?
Everything. From top to bottom, every single thing has gone wrong. We have the worst economy in the United States. This is not what we bargained for. Now they're talking about raising taxes. It's utter insanity, top to bottom. I don't think you can point to one single thing that went wrong. I think you had a great article this week kind of summarizing public corruption and what a detriment that has to economic development and growth in a given area. And I think that's probably a large part of it. But top to bottom, it's been an absolute economic disaster for the last 5 years in Alabama.
I mean, Susan, we came down here thinking these guys were going to do something different. They did. It's gotten worse.
Really. And I have to say it's been getting worse for a while, but still we had real hope that once the Republicans took over down here, that they were going to get and they have gotten jobs in here. The problem is they've lost jobs. They're not counting those numbers. So the percentage doesn't equal out.
Well, Jack, the highest growth in jobs is in the service sector.
Yeah. Yeah, no, this whole handshake with Alabama, we were going to have a new economy. We were going to have an open assault on corruption. And it's just totally, the tables have turned. I mean, it's worse than when the Democrats were in charge. This promise of we're going to end this 136 years of Democrat control and it's going to be a new day. It's a new day, all right. It's worst state in the country.
A new day when they re-elect a gentleman with 23 felony indictments against him to be Speaker of the House again.
I think it does go back to a large degree, to public corruption, as we were talking about before, because people do not want to do business in a state where it's pay to play. I mean, maybe we should go down that road just a little bit.
Well, I'll give you an example. I saw a speaker, I don't know, it was maybe a year ago or so, and she was talking to a civic group, and she said, I'm based out of Florida. I'm up here. I kind of have Alabama also, but my group will not have an Alabama-based person because everyone nationally knows Alabama's a pay-to-play state. And she said, and as a result, we don't have a service we're offering. All these other states will donate to your organization for conservative causes just out of the goodness of their heart. In Alabama, they don't do that. They want something in return or they're not going to give you any money. And it's not just on, philosophical ideas. I mean, it's that way on business, too. And when you saw the list of indictments that were against Mike Hubbard, when that came out, the number of people in there that have been giving him money in exchange, it appears, for favorable legislation or directing business into their area. I mean, this is a pay-to-play state. That's why we're the worst economy in the country.
Harvard did a study last year that tracked illegal corruption and how prevalent it was, and legal corruption. And Alabama Political Reporter took part in that survey. We're taking part in it again. They found that Alabama was extremely high in the area of legal and illegal corruption. Susan, you worked on that. What is explain legal corruption?
Well, legal corruption is where maybe you give money to a legislator and expect something in return from that legislator.
That's sort of, we did this story the other day about Alpha Insurance. Alpha Insurance in 1995 gave about $2.5 million in campaign contributions. In 1995, the legislature passed a law that gave Alpha an unfair advantage over every other company. Now, it's not something illegal, but it is legal corruption. That's the way I see it. Barron, what about you?
No, that's exactly right. And Susan summarized it very well. And everybody understands this. This is what the pay-to-play we're talking about. I'm going to give you money, Mr. Legislator, but you know what my issue is. And I expect you, once you're elected, to turn around and change the law so that I have a competitive advantage over my competitors.
You know, this happened with the premium insurance tax, the tax you pay on insurance, right?
It did.
And how did Alpha profit where other companies didn't?
Well, between 93 and 95, Alpha gave $2.3 million to campaigns through 2 PACs. By 1995, the legislature had changed their insurance premium tax from 3.6 to 1.6, which allowed them between 2008 and 2013 to save $70 million.
So if Jack had Alpha and I've got Nationwide, I pay more?
You pay more than he does.
And then I cover for Jack's getting credit.
There's some loopholes because Nationwide is not, they don't have own buildings in the state and some things like that that were put into the law to give Alpha an advantage.
Can we
on
get a tax advantage like that, Jack, you think?
No, we don't, Bill, and it's not a level playing field out there. And I would never suggest that Alpha is corrupt because they're a very well-established and respected company. But because of their participation in the political process over the years, they did get an unfair advantage. It's not illegal, but it certainly kind of doesn't pass the smell test.
Well, that's why they call it legal corruption. I mean,
there's nothing they're playing within the rules.
Right.
They're getting loopholes developed into the law so that they could drive trucks through it, and it is perfectly legal. It's not what we were promised with new Republican leadership, but it's legal.
You know, I was talking to a legislator the other day, and he said, I'm sick of hearing about transparency. He said, why don't we just talk about being honest? Because transparency would be honest, but we're not wanting to be honest. I mean, Susan, when Governor Bentley tried to change the insurance premium tax law and make it more fair, what happened?
Crickets. He offered it in his initial tax package, and he couldn't even get a legislator to pick it up.
Not a Republican. No Republican.
No Republican, because they all take the Alpha money, and you know, they're rational actors. They know who feeds them.
And to be fair to Alpha, this goes on with other industries as well. It's not just insurance.
Yes, but this would put back into the general fund $25 million annually. But we're going to have to leave it there. You're watching The V, the voice of Alabama politics. We'll be right back after this commercial break.
The V is sponsored by Spot On Strategies Group.
Sadly, this happens too often in families with autistic children.
First nightmare, their child wanders off, disappears, and is nowhere to be found.
Where her body was found just a couple hours ago.
An autistic boy wanders away from home and dies.
Welcome back to the voice of Alabama politics. Welcome, Claire.
Good morning. Good to be with y'all.
Good to have you. The Porch Creek Indians have, some would say graciously, offered to advance the state $250 million in exchange for a compact that would virtually give them a monopoly over gaming in the state. Dale Marsh has offered a plan that would open it up to 4 other groups and allow the Indians to also have the Class 3 gaming under a compact. Claire, do you think they would give that $250 million under the Marsh plan?
Absolutely not. The whole thing's egregious. I mean, I think there's some changes that need to be made even in Dale's, but Dale's got the Senator Marsh has got the right idea. I mean, they're not calling this a loan, they're calling it an advance. What do you give them, a payday advance loan to the state of Alabama?
I thought they were against payday loans.
I mean, it just doesn't even make sense.
Well, Jack, I mean, $250 million, if it's really a generous offer, why not give it under any circumstances?
It's a quid pro quo.
Absolutely.
But there's no other way around it. To give them the exclusive right to have gambling sites and no one else, and in return you get $250 million, I'm sorry, that is wrong.
You think Philip Morris would take that deal on cigarettes, Barron?
Yeah. Well, Jack and I have a public relations company. Can you imagine if we went to the state of any state agency and said, we're going to give you money, but we want exclusive rights to do your public relations work? That's a bribe. Jack and I would be in prison for even offering. They would be in prison for accepting. Everyone would go to prison, rightfully so. But somehow, people are looking at this saying, that might be not a bad idea.
So the Indians exempt from prison?
Well, I don't know.
Speaker of the House is behind it 100%.
Well, what does that tell you? Come on. He's the king of ethics.
Add 2 more counts. Go to trial in October.
I mean, you, Claire, you spend a lot more time with legislators than most of us. So what are you hearing out there?
Well, I mean, I've heard that the House is more interested in maybe doing a lottery, and but I think majority of the people are not for this monopoly by the Porch Creek Indians. So they're just not for it.
We polled it, Barron.
Taxes are almost more popular than it.
You know, the fact that what we've been hearing is that they're going to spend $1.5 million in the next 45 days. That's $100,000 a day. That's big money, Claire.
You mean 1.5 or 4.5?
4.5.
Yeah, right. I was going to say, yeah, I thought you left about $3 million off.
That's a few million off the table. Well, $3 million here, $3 million there. They got $100, $200 million to just advance.
Well, I mean, the PCI has all the money they can use. They have unlimited resources, shall I say, and they're going to do and spend what it takes to protect their turf and their market to make sure nobody else breaks into Alabama.
Well, you know, we talked about this before, that this whole gaming thing might end up where everybody's fighting each other and nothing happens. And we've seen this before, haven't we, Jack?
It's possible it could happen again.
Right.
Well, and let's be honest, the Indians want status quo is their second option.
That's right.
They'd love to have the exclusive compact, but all else fails. Status quo, they're making $1 million a day.
Dale Marsh hasn't budged. Mike Hubbard hasn't budged. You got this new Alabama Jobs Foundation. They're in line with Dale, and here it is a few weeks before a new session, supposedly, and there's no other plan out there. There's no talk about compromise or meetings, or it's like silent.
And then how do you combat with, I mean, I haven't seen the dollar figures, and it's a nonprofit. They don't have to, promote what kind of money they've raised around the state. But when you've got $4.5 million in the 45 days going into the media markets versus, say, even if they had $1 million, that's pretty difficult to combat.
Well, absolutely. And, Charles McCrary wrote an op-ed that we ran this week. AL.com ran it. Several other folks read it. And he's still hammering on this jobs. But one of the things that I thought was most interesting, he points out that the gambling money from Alabama is going to pay for schools in Mississippi and Tennessee and infrastructure and all this stuff, Jack. I mean, it's crazy.
He's absolutely correct. I mean, just like people are going to gamble no matter what. If they want to do it, they're going to go to Mississippi, they're going to go to Tennessee, they're going to go to Georgia, and they're going to go to Florida because it surrounds us, whether it's a lottery or gaming, they're going to do it.
This is one of the times, and Barron, you and I talked about this some, we are not hearing a peep hardly out of the religious right. I mean, it has just been quiet.
No, it's absolute, total, unadulterated silence. Everywhere you turn is total silence. And we could speculate all day long what that means. I have my opinions. Others may have theirs. But this has been some of the quietest time I can recall when a legislative session is looming.
Yeah, I mean, normally we would have a lot more news than we're having. It is a quiet news cycle. I will tell you, we published something by Minority Leader Craig Ford. He said, look, the state's broke, but the problem is the state government is broken. And I think we all would agree with him at some level that it's broken.
Yeah, I mean, and we say it every week, and it's like a broken record. They promised us this. If you give us control, the Republicans, that is, you give us control, it's going to be a new day in Alabama. And it really and truly has gotten worse. And I'm embarrassed to say that I'm a Republican at this point in time.
You know, we really have been looking for some real Republicans. We've got some, but do we have some real conservatives?
We have some, but I mean, it depends on what part of the leadership you're talking about. And so there's a lot of friction, I think, in both the House and in the Senate. But, you know, there's been that infusion of the BP money that they have put in, so that gives them a little bit. But that's going to be spread out over, I think it's
18 years.
18 years.
Yeah.
So that's not going to fill the void. I mean, it plays a dynamic, but it's not fill the void at all.
So we're going to be right back to where we were if we don't get the gaming passed, if we don't get Bentley's tax passed. I mean, there's a lot of people, Barron, who just say, let it burn, baby, burn. I mean, just don't do anything.
Well, I've kind of long advocated this to the chagrin of fellow Republicans who've given me a hard time about it, but I think they're starting to come around now and say, fine, burn the House down and let's start over.
Yeah. I don't know that that's the worst thing that could happen, Jack.
Yeah, well, you know, I don't necessarily agree with that, but if we can avert it, I want to. But on the other hand, if it means sweeping out some of these guys and the gals, I'm all for it.
Well, Bill, you asked a moment ago, do we have any real conservatives? The answer is there are a few, but they're so marginalized and pushed to the back bench you'll never hear from them.
Well, we need more.
Yeah,
we need
absolutely.
more of them to stand up. Well, we're going to leave it right there. You're watching The Voice of Alabama Politics. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Voice of Alabama Politics. Claire, you were talking about the BP settlement money, and we need to take a few minutes to talk about that. State's going to roughly get a little over $2 billion over 18 years. Governor Bentley has said that he wants to see that money go to the general fund. We're hearing John McMillan, Commissioner McMillan, says no. Other folks are saying no. I mean, what's your thoughts on this?
Well, I mean, it's clear that the general fund has the dire straits, and that's what's broke. But I think also a certain amount also has to go to the coastal areas of the state of Alabama to maintain and upkeep that. But I would think the majority of the money would go to the general fund because that's where the crisis is.
Yeah, but
and that's why I mentioned that, because it can help fill a little bit of that hole we have in the general fund.
Well, you disagree with that's where it should go.
I disagree completely. I could not disagree more. Shout it from the rooftops. If you're going to spend the money, if you're not going to put it in the trust fund, we'll get back to that. If you're going to spend it, it goes to education. That's where it came from. That money that we lost was income tax and sales tax. Those dollars would have gone into education. Our teachers haven't had a raise in 8 years. You don't go stealing it now and saying, well, now we're getting it back, so we'll just slip it into general fund because we're incompetent and can't manage money. So that's problem one. Problem two is John McMillan is the smartest guy in the room. If John McMillan doesn't run for governor, it'll be a crying shame for the state of Alabama. The Department of Agriculture and Industries commissioner, constitutional officer, came out and said, put this thing in the Alabama Trust Fund where it can kick off interest forever.
Right.
More forever than they would be kicking off, than they would be spending each year now.
Well, it's only about 55 million a year, right,
50,
Jack?
yeah,
I mean,
it's a
that's
little over 50 million a year.
55 million is a what?
2.5% return.
Right, but how much do we owe?
To the Alabama, well, we owe 437.
Yeah, but I mean, 55 will go away toward that.
Yeah,
and
8 years you pay it back, and then you put the rest of it in there, and it's going to kick off 20, 50, 80 million dollars,
and
depending on interest rates.
It's a circus of liars. They knew when they borrowed that money they weren't going. How were they going to pay it back?
Well, they kept saying they were going to pay it back. But,
yeah, BP money.
Okay, I agree with you to a certain extent, but I mean, they ultimately need to pay this money back. But if you're in deep, dire crisis, which our general fund is, as we sit here today, we're less than 30 days supposedly for a special session. There doesn't appear to be a plan.
So you steal it from the kids?
Well, no.
I mean, how does that make any sense?
I'm not saying steal it from the kids.
So you lie and say we're not going to pay back the trust fund? I mean, that's the third option.
They got to do it eventually. But okay, we're going to shut down Medicaid. We're going to let prisoners out, and people will go crazy over that. So what? State employees and teachers. I mean, I feel bad for them. The economy has been tough. Recession is bad. People in the corporate world hadn't had raises either. And, I mean, we got to make ends meet. But you're right. I mean, there needs to be some serious leadership, and they need to take the bull by the horns and handle it.
We were happy when we got that information from Commissioner McMillan just to be able to put that out there, because it's about the only plan that we've seen that doesn't just say, well, let's just spend every dime we get.
Let's just blow it.
Yeah. I mean, we are borrow and spend Republicans in Alabama, aren't we?
We've become steal and spend Republicans in Alabama.
That's a new one.
Wow, that's good, Barry.
Yeah, I'm so frustrated. John McMillan is the only voice of reason in government these days, it seems like.
Well, he's done a great job.
Yeah,
he's a very reasonable man, and he has. Everybody can look what he's done at the Ag Department.
Absolutely. Well, he's not in with this crowd either.
And mainstreaming things.
No, and thankfully he's not in with this crowd.
I mean, he's a Republican who was never a part of the in crowd. Right. The Mike Hubbards, the Bob Riley, all that gang.
And when he was at Forestry, the place was smooth running, honest, open. I don't want to dog on Forestry, but it's changed since he's been gone.
Yeah, well, we were talking during
they've all had to change in the last 8 years because everybody's had to kiss the ring on the 5th floor. What you talking about?
Well, and that's the problem.
That is the problem.
We were talking earlier today during the break. We know it only takes one conviction for Hubbard to be gone and everything would change. But we were talking during the break about the silence. And Barron, you had some thoughts on it. There is so much silence coming out of the State House, and Mike Hubbard's legal team is silent. There's just silence, and that's crazy silence.
Yeah, it's a worn out cliche to say silence is deafening.
Yeah.
But in this case, it truly is. Mike Hubbard for the last 5 years until this last year has controlled all the money. And when he controlled all the money, he had complete control over the House. They walked lockstep. The Senate just obeyed whatever he wanted. And then over the last year or so, when he was found out to be a crook, everybody sort of went away. And my theory was the money probably dried up because people didn't want to pay to play anymore. Well, along come the Indians with their plan to get $250 million here. They have an unlimited budget. Money's flying around everywhere on advertising. And now all of a sudden, everybody's sort of consolidating back around Hubbard again. Did they pick up the slack? I don't know, but did they pick up the slack? Have we found the missing money?
Well, one of the reasons they quit advertising with us is because Mike Hubbard told them they had to quit advertising with us or he wouldn't help them out. I mean, that's pretty low down to me.
Yeah.
Well, he told the Republican caucus not to hire Barron and me if they wanted a contribution from any of his PACs.
I mean, how petty is all that?
I had 2 guys tell me that.
Better party of one is what it's called.
I wanted to get into this thing. Mike's been charged with 23 felony counts of public corruption. We've had 2 other governors charged and 2 other governors go to prison. Jack, what do you think about that?
Well, I hope they're warming a spot for him.
Yeah.
Actually, I mean, we know for a fact that he steered business to Craftmaster, his printing company, when he was party chair. And then Mark White makes some ridiculous argument like, well, he only made $9,000. Well, guess what? If he made a penny, that's in violation of the ethics law. That's one right there that we know of. This pharmacy co-op,
APCI.
Greg Wren averted jail time and resigned from the House and pled guilty to sponsoring an amendment that profited him and the Speaker. Now, how is he going to get out of that one?
Barron, you defense attorney on occasion. 23 counts.
Look, now I've handled people probably were guiltier than this, frankly, but you know, there are times you go into trial and you know you're going to lose. You're just preserving things for appeal. You're doing the best you can. I've got to think Mark White is taking this tactic. He's got to know the Speaker is 100% guilty on this stuff. The judge and jury is ultimately going to be the one to decide. But if I was Mark White going in to try this, I'm just preserving things for appeal and hoping the Alabama Supreme Court bails me out.
Guy Hunt was charged with, 13 counts? How many did they get him on?
They got him on one.
One.
Siegelman, had 33, is that right?
Yeah,
and they got him
7.
on 7. Of course, you take Hunt was first, then Siegelman, and people with the electronic age and ethics and all like that. So the king of the fifth floor's got 23. So what y'all bet? How many? I'd say at least 3 or 4.
Well, I'd say 4. I'm just guessing.
I'm going to 18.
Good for you.
18. Well, we're going to leave it there at 18, but it only takes...
Hey, and Dell, we're going to bet on this.
It only takes one.
That's exactly right. You've been watching The V, the voice of Alabama politics. You can catch new stories every day on alreporter.com and catch us on YouTube and on your television stations throughout the state. Thank you for watching.